Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the security stream for the GSE conference. Most of you know me, I know, but my name is Jamie Pease. I'm the chair of the security stream. This is session 1BC, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back, I can say now, well, an ex-colleague of mine, Hans Scanner from IBM Security. So he's the chief architect of the Z Secure suite of products, and Hans and I worked together when I was product manager for Z Secure a few years ago now. And I saw Hans the announcement letter for all the new things that have come out in Z Secure 2.5, and it's quite a long list. So I'm really looking forward to what you've got to say about it. So welcome back to GSE, Hans, and the stage is yours. Thank you.
Okay. You can all see the screen, I hope, with the presentation. So what I want to talk about mainly is compliance. Compliance is hot. And I'll be talking a bit about new stuff we have been shipping in the last 2 years. And also some stuff other people have been shipping. Why do we want all those compliance checks to be automated? Well, basically reducing time. Why? At which standards would we look? Well, there's a lot of standards to choose from. So there are in the security arena, I know about 45 different standards, but they all kind of relate to kind of mother standards, I would say. And one of these is the NIST 800 SP53. And that's a kind of standard which has a number of variables in there. So that also holds for related standards like ISO 27001. These standards say you should have a policy to do this or that, but they don't exactly say what the policy should say. And that's a difficulty for automating compliance checking. If you want to save time, it would be handy if you had someone fill in what these parameters should be. And that's where the sticks come in. So DISA, the Defense Information Security Agency from the Department of Defense in the US, has published guides, the security technical implementation guides, that help you apply the NIST 800 SP53 standard to certain software packages like ZOS or like CA1. So there are many sticks. We treat them, so everything that applies to ZOS and the software running on ZOS, we kind of throw together and handle as one thing. We informally say the ZOS sticks, but it's actually a number of implementation guides. And what they say is kind of vetted. So there's a whole process in DISA to get a stick published for a certain package. So there's reason to use that intelligence, or if you want, and the parameters that have been filled in to apply to ZOS. So that's why it's good to look at the sticks. What we have done in the past 2 years, well, we have added automation for another 42 stick controls. So 2 years ago, we had 2.4 with ZOS 2.4, and then we had automation or procedural controls, 317 controls. Now we added 42 that are automated. In the future, there are 18 that we might further automate, or we won't do it. That depends a bit on how old the software is that they are talking about. So what's new in 2.5? We have all new report types added to enable the stick control automation. So for instance, we have made a report type certificate to describe the digital certificates. And one of the reasons for this is that makes it easier to to search on certificate labels, because certificate labels are stored in the RACF database in a user profile, not in the digital certificate profile. So it's difficult to find all the labels under which a specific certificate is known. So that's why we added a separate certificate type. So that makes working with certificates in the user interface a lot easier. And also it enabled us to do checks. So for instance, one of the things here is checking whether a certificate is used in a certain application. So for instance, there are fields in this new list type to check in which MQ regions that certificate is being used. Next one is the integrated operations architecture from BMC in control. There's a number of controls around that. I'll come to that shortly. Then we have the INetD daemon. I'll talk about the on-demand start of daemons and how the INetD configuration regulates that. Then we have the JES device and the JES remote. New report types. We already had the just the NJE nodes, so you don't see those here because we already had it. Then there's the SSH daemons, and for our first session manager, super session region control points. So that's the IBM, the old Kennel product, super session. And each record in this report type describes a network access manager control point. So actually one super session region can manage multiple control points. And the control point is the level at which security settings are created. Well, to go into some more detail here, for the certificate is used for some of these stick controls. You see here two names. One is the stick version 6 name and the other is the stick version 8 name. For version 8 they renamed the controls, but only for the RACF sticks and not for the product sticks. So. Then we have, so trusted certificates. You want to make sure that you don't trust the wrong entity, right? So you want to make sure that you know who you're trusting. So that's a check on the domain, the distinguished name, the DN of the issuer of a certificate that you use as a certificate authority certificate. And then you also want to be able to find expired certificate, make sure they're not expired. And you also want to check if you have certificate name filters that you don't map the whole world until a highly authorized user ID in the mainframe, right? So the certificate name filters also need to be checked. Then we have BMC. The order of these things, by the way, is alphabetical. That's why we are now at the I for IOA. So this is about the BMC control products. They have modules, optional modules you can install, and they are needed to implement the external security monitor interface. So that's the devm check, DMNO parameters, kind of make sure that the access control module gets loaded, and then the extend parameters make sure that the ESM checks are done. And control although has one more prod. And there's another setting also for using the owner field in those access control decisions. Now with the just two devices, so there we check the auditing, the universal access, ID asterisk permits, the warning mode of the JES input and writer devices. And also we check the access list, whether that's restricted to the appropriate personnel. So that's one control for input sources and one control for output devices. Now with the remote terminals, Of course, a real remote terminal you won't see often anymore. I'm old enough to have seen them and worked with them. But nowadays, it's always some other computer connecting to the mainframe and entering work. But you have to look out what you do with the authorities there, because there's a full operator command interface available through the RJE protocol. And then you can issue commands to your current system and systems the system is connected to, and so on and so on, if you don't secure that properly. So the remote workstation needs to be defined as a user ID, and there needs to be a facility profile to control kind of stuff. INET daemon is also very interesting. So if you were just to look at your current IP settings and see which ports, which daemons are listening to which port, then you would miss the fact that some of these services might be started when somebody wants to connect to them. That's what INET daemon does. So it listens for certain services, and there's a table in the system where the services are linked to a specific port number. This is the below 1024 ports. And if somebody then tries to connect to it, then INET would start the daemon with the parameters that are specified in the INET configuration file. Now, there are a lot of standard Unix services which don't require any authentication. And that is a violation of most security standards that say you should only allow a person to enter the system after authentication. So that's why the RACF US 180 control requires 18 services to be absent from the INET configuration. So even if you try to connect to them, they should not be started. And then there are some additional controls about the startup parameters of the OTelnet daemon. So that's one of the services that is allowed to be started, the Unix telnet variant, not the TN3270 variant. And the startup parameters must, for instance, specify the right banner file, so that the compliance check that's being done here is that you point to a banner file that has the right text that is your lawyers require, right? So it depends a bit on the country, but sometimes you have to specify that it's forbidden to hack into the system, or that you will be prosecuted if you try to enter the system without proper credentials or without proper authorization. So that's the banner thing. And we also, I mean, that's a feature that has been easy secure for years now, but it's now extended also to the OTelnet daemon. Then we have the secure shell daemon. There we check that version 2 protocols being used, that we use the right crypto algorithms that are FIPS 114-2 compliant. There's again the warning banner. There must be a warning banner and it must have the right content. And it would be nice if there's actually an audit trail of somebody logging on through the secure shell daemon. And I have to stress that I'm surprised at how many sites have forgotten to actually activate audit trail in SSH. So that's an important one to check, because you wouldn't see that somebody log on through SSHD if you don't have that the right options set in your SSHD configuration file. And the last one checks that you're using certificates. The mapping from a certificate to a RACF user is done through the SAF keyring. And that also kind of ties into then that certificates would be using hardware crypto if the certificate is configured that way. Next one is the supersession control point. There we want to check that the external security monitor is used to authenticate users. So who is allowed and who is revoked, things like that should be using the settings from the external security monitor. And then we also want to see that users are only let or only see the right applications. So the list of applications that's on the system should be visible only to the users that are allowed to see that or use that application. So that's called the dynamic application list. So that's kind of what the four controls check. And yeah, you see some difficult names here. So KLV innem is the name of the member where you have to set the external security, and then you have the virtual gateway parameter list, VGWAP list must be set to external, and then must specify the app class Apple to get the right dynamic application list. And of course, you also want to write an audit trail in SMF. So these were the new list types that were added in 2.5. Now we have some other new fields. So we added some fields to do checking for Unix, of the Unix controls. And I'm going to talk about some other stuff you need for compliance. That's file integrity monitoring. So file integrity monitoring is what you need to comply, for instance, with PCI DSS control 11.5. So you need to have a change detection mechanism for your parameter libraries like sys1 parmlib and the APF libraries. Basically anything that is your infrastructure should be protected from unauthorized modification, and you need to verify it outside of an audit trail. So this is not an audit trail, but this is taking a checksum or fingerprint of a file and then compare that fingerprint to the previous version or golden version. And the PCI DSS control requires you to do that at least weekly. To do it hourly is impossible because in most sites it takes more than an hour to create a checksum of all these data sets. We try to exploit the hardware. So in Z Secure we use the CPACF facility to efficiently create the SHA-3 512 hashes of all this write sensitive data. And that's been a feature that's actually already in 2.4, but I just want to mention it because it's very important for the compliance, keeping up with the compliance, and yeah, not enough people are using it yet. Let me put it like that. The other thing you need to do to be compliant is to use multi-factor authentication. So the IBM MFA product is available for both ZOS and CVM. And typically people require 2 factors, a physical token and a password. And this is required by PCI DSS version 3.2.1, which is the current version. It says all individual non-console administrative access and all remote access to the cardholder and data environment should be using multi-factor authentication. So we wonder why we don't sell more of it, basically, because you should be using it. One of the new features in 2.5 is that now we also support the CVM's MFA implementation that RACF did, the RACF CVM MFA support. We have made it easier to select on the status of your users, whether the user ID actually has a password, whether it has a passphrase, and whether it has an active MFA factor. the new stuff that was shipped as an SSE. That's the sensitive tape dataset support. So we did support tape datasets already, but we didn't support the sensitivity type for it. And now, if you do a simulate to say, well, this dataset name pattern is PCI DSS sensitive or GDPR sensitive, if the dataset name pattern covers datasets that have device type tape, then they now are also put into reports and analyzed for appropriate security. Where do we get those tape dataset names? Well, there's the IBM Removable Media Manager, part of the DFSMS. The control dataset contains the tape dataset names, the full 44-character tape dataset names. And there's other packages like Broadcom CL1 and Broadcom CATLMS that we also support to get the tape dataset name resources. And also ECF catalog entries with device class tape, and they might or might not be saying the same thing as these tape management systems. There's a whole world of possible discrepancies, and then we also have the current address space allocations with device class tape. So that's where we get the tape datasets. And as a consequence of this feature, you might actually see that reports suddenly get a lot bigger. So some people have reported that they suddenly got a million lines more. Now I want to spend some time on what I think people find the most difficult control. So the most difficult control is the AC6 from NIST 800 SPV53. That's about the principle of least privilege. Allow only authorized access necessary to accomplish assigned tasks in accordance with the business functions and so on. So how do you automate checking for that? First the question, is this only for 853? No, it's not only for 853. It's also PCI DSS 712, where it says restrict access to privileged user ID to the least privileges necessary to perform job responsibility. It's also part of the high-tech, the health information technology for economic and clinical health. It says that the entity, and that's the organization, must make reasonable efforts to limit protected health information to the minimum necessary to accomplish the intended purpose. And it's also a hot topic because of zero trust. So one of the core principles of zero trust is minimize access to resources, the principle of least privilege. And there's other terms like defense in depth that go in the same direction. So how can we help? There's actually two big areas where we try to address this automation requirement. The first one is that we check user privilege against a list of user IDs and groups per job role in the IT infrastructure. So that's one of the areas where the stick has filled in a number of blanks, and they distinguish more than 20 different job roles. And we call that the allow list members. We could also call it access matrix verification. So it's kind of shadow administration where you verify that the content of your external security monitor, the net effect, the effective protection provided by your ESM should match what you put in those allow list members, so that only the people that have a positive identification in the allow list members are allowed those infrastructure job roles that have more than normal access. The second big area is to see what happens. So we collect counts of the actual privilege use by user ID. And you could summarize that by quarter or by year. That's what we call the access monitor feature. So what do we do today? We try to answer the question, what is the minimum access? So the standards talk about least privilege and minimum access, but what the heck is that, right? That's one of the problems. So if you think about it, one of the things you could look at, does the user actually need this user ID in the first place? Has the user ID been used in the past year? If it has not been used in the past year, you'll have a hard time defending that it's a needed privilege. I mean, there is a big exception for contingency and emergency things, but for normal users, if the user ID has not been used, we can say, well, he doesn't need it. Has a user RACF group connect been used, right? If it has never been used, the fact that you have a RACF connect, then you could safely remove that connect and he would have been able to work for the whole year, right? Same for permission. So permission on a certain resource access level. So if he has an update permit, has it actually been used in the year? Maybe he has only used read permits. And then the least privilege requirement says you should reduce that to read access. So that's what C-Secure Access Monitor did in 2.4. You can reduce or change the RACF rules to remove authorities that have not been used. And a lot of companies are using that. And you can debate whether you should look for a year or for 3 months. That's where people have different opinions. But the point of using the year is that you include the year-end processing. So that's why a lot of people use the full year. What's new in 2.5? So here we have more support. And the biggest feature, it's actually one of the biggest features of the release, is measure who is using on Unix authorities. So now we not only look at RACF connects and permissions and whether a user ID is used, we also can see whether the file mode is used, whether if you give a group an execute permit, whether that has been used, things like that. So there's a whole world. So I could make a separate 1-hour presentation about this feature. I have not done that. I'm going to talk about what we also do new in 2.5 is looking at the program authorities. So until now, the class program was accepted because that works slightly different with the program control. So we're now looking at who is using the program authorities to get some idea on which program profiles are or are not used. And then another loose end was access through local RAC list resources. So an example was the super session. It actually did a local RAC list. And the problem is that then the RAC check actually happens in non-APF mode. So we're a bit wary of accepting non-APF callers and administering things, but we have now implemented the program call to try to figure out that it's okay and collect this information. Also for the legacy software, if you will, that never got around to adding global is yes on their RAC route requests. One little thing for ACF2 users. So if you are an ACF2 user, I would strongly recommend installing 2.5 because we have made it a lot faster. So for measurements we did for a specific customer, the CPU was reduced by a factor 30, so 97% reduction. Storage was reduced by a factor 5, and of course it all depends on what's exactly in your ACF2 database, but I'm certainly happy with it because my response time on the terminal is way faster. Now, so far I only talked about compliance stuff, but there's a lot more stuff. So, and I don't have time here in this presentation to do that all. So as usual, we will offer customer a user grab webinar at some point. We delivered more than 66 RFEs in the past 2 years. And here you see the kind of timeline. So after the 2019 Q3 general availability of 2.4, we issued a few SSEs, and now there's the 2.5 release has gone GA in end of September. Now, so what are some of these additional RFEs? One is the IP origin of TSO logon. So people would like to know from where people connect to TSO. And that's not so easy to figure out. So we are now combining information from multiple SMF records to try to figure that out. But it will be a kind of continuing story. One of the difficulties here is, for instance, what happens if you do the TSO reconnect. You can reconnect from a different IP address, and we support that. Then we have and this, I'm talking about TSO logons via TN3270. Another feature is the end-to-end audit for if you come in through ZOS Connect, one of the modern web interfaces, and then you're calling KIX, and KIX is calling DB2. How do you tie all that together? And yeah, so we built support for that to report these records together through the unit of work ID and the tracking token. And that there were also updates to CICS and DB2 and to ZOS Connect required to achieve that. And after they had done their work, we could finally tie it together. Another feature that has been requested by, I think, at least 20 customers was the lookup of RACF custom data field names. So if you make a C field profile to define a new custom data field, then you can now use that field name in Carla queries, look up the value. So then you can go from one segment to another and enrich your reports with stuff from the custom field names. And that typically is things like an employee number or department or whatever. Personnel number. The next one is the SMF recording changes. So the type 90 records contain bits arrays about the SMF recording options. So if SMF recording is switched off, which might be a precursor to doing something nasty, you want to know about it. And they are now flagged in the curator feed. There you can now see which SMF record types have been switched off. Then there's the issue of certificate fingerprints. That's a new ZOS 2.5 feature that fingerprint information is available in more places. And we support that. So you can look for the use of a certain certificate by looking for the fingerprint. Another feature associated closely with ZOS 2.5 is having the WCAG database in a VSAM dataset. So we support that too. Another new feature we now support is the ICSF master key age. So one of the compliance, that's another compliance topic, because one of the compliance topic is that master keys should be refreshed at least once a year or once every 2 years. So for that to prove compliance, you need to know how old or when the last master key change was, and that wasn't part of ICSF until the ZOS 2.5 time frame. So now it is, and there's SMF records about it, and there's the actual age. So we now support printing the age of that master key. There's even a new user interface option, ra.k.m, that shows you the age of every master key. And that applies to the CKDS, the PKDS, and the TKDS. Then there's a number of alert options. So one of the often requested RFEs was the batch configuration deployment. So if you modify the alert configuration, you add your own custom alert, or you activate one of the standard alerts to deploy that new configuration to all the systems. That has been made a lot easier. Another feature is alert internal refresh. That is about enrichment data. So in SMF records, there's basically many SMF records miss a lot of information, like which user ID was doing it. We tie that together by keeping around information in the what we call the job tag system. And the alert has an environment interval where every hour we restart the program basically to make sure we pick up more recent information from the security database. And now we have made that refresh internal so that the state of all the job tags gets saved. So basically, your user ID will remain cached, and so the enrichment information for the SMF records will be more consistent due to this feature. Another alert feature is that we now have a keep alive option for people where the firewall terminates the connection if there was no traffic for some time. And because alerts are typically not coming very frequent, it's especially the alert product that falls victim to components in your network that decide to close the TCP connection. The same area as the next one. So it used to be that a TCP destination to, for instance, a curator box or an ArcSight box would be opened, and then it might be minutes or hours before an actual alert is sent across that link, and then it was already terminated again by somebody on the road. So we now have an option to connect only to the curator box when there actually is no alert, so that the chance that we have to restart the connection is a lot lower. And also that makes the time that the red message is visible on the console a lot shorter and a lot less frequent occurrence. We also have some new alerts. I'm not showing them all, but I'm calling out the one that uses the IP origin address. So there's a new alert 1124 where you can blacklist IP addresses or ranges of IP addresses and get for instance, get an alert if somebody, logs on from outside. You're allowed your green listed IP range. And there's an alert about the password spraying attack where somebody tries a specific password on all user IDs, like when an NBA player has scored, then there's a big chance that people on the next password change will do something with that player's name, right? And then you can try that password on all the user IDs. That's called the password spraying attack. And there's now an alert for that. Okay. That's what I thought would fit in these meetings, and we can now have questions.
Thank you very much, Hans. Gosh, there's a lot of changes. Some really good stuff there, some good work. So yeah, folks, any questions for Hans? I've enabled, you can unmute your line if you want to ask questions directly to Hans, or you can post them in the chat and we can read them out. No, don't be shy. Now, I like the sort of functionality you've been working on, Hans, around sort of the principle of least privilege. It's a hot topic. I mean, I'm effectively a customer now, by the way. I'm working for an insurance company, and we're doing a lot of work in that area and sort of zero trust. And so I'm very pleased to hear some of the features that I will hopefully get access to at some point. Yeah. So good work. And I was very interested in the sort of the Unix side as well. So does that mean, like, to sort of think of from an access monitor perspective, it's going to be like a lot more data then that's going to be collected in the access monitor data sets?
Yeah, well, that risk exists. Yeah.
Yes.
We did do a lot of coding around trying to reduce the overhead. So when a typical Unix open happens, there's a whole hierarchy. You're opening if the 10 directories, if it's 10 deep, and we have tried to reduce that to one event, basically, and not write a record for every 10 of those directories.
Okay.
Because that would, I mean, there's already, so something simple like starting ZOSMF, does more than 30,000 RACF checks.
Wow. And if, like, because Z Security 2.5, is it does it go, how far back does it support in terms of ZOS releases?
Whatever is
like,
supported by the systems guys, that's the policy.
Okay.
It's like is it ZOS 2.3? I think it's 2.3.
Yeah, I had in the back of my mind sort of, was it 2.3? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, folks? You want to throw at Hans now? We have the chief architect here of Z Secure. So any Z Secure users out there wants to fire a question away, do so now. No. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hans, for taking the time to prepare your presentation, and of course coming to present to us. Like I say, it's really good to see the good work continuing to to keep the product up to date with all the the latest changes in ZOS and the subsystems, and of course what's going on in the compliance world. It's a moving target, isn't it? And I always say this, Hans, forgive me for saying this, but I always say this at the end of GSE when we have a Z Secure presentation. Thank you for looking after my baby. It's nice to see it going so well. So folks, that was session 1BC for the purpose of feedback. So if you could do that, a quick just recap. I know I say this every time, but the answer to the second question, what was the length of the presentation, that the best answer to give there is 5, not 9, but otherwise you're saying the presentation is too long. So if you believe your presentation was, the timing was correct, then it's 5, and then the rest, to give the score that you think is appropriate. So please do give feedback. Remember, it contributes to your CPE points if you're collecting those. Also feedback for Hans and for GSE as well, like what additional topics and things you would like to see in the future. And you can go to the agenda page and or click on the QR code there with your camera, or go to the agenda page and click on Hans's session and scroll right down to the bottom and you'll see the feedback link there too. And don't forget our charity as well. Hans did show up the slide right at the beginning. Again, you can go to the agenda page and see the Virgin Money giving link. And if you would like to donate, please do so. I just had a quick look, and we're at 73% of our target for our fundraising. So it's crept up from this morning, which is fantastic to see. Hans, I guess you'll upload your presentation deck to the GSE website at some point, so that will hopefully be available to download. And
yep.
Again, thank you. And this session is being recorded, of course, so if you missed parts of it, or you've got colleagues who want to listen to the replay, it'll be available for on-demand viewing for GSE members. So that is it from the security stream today, but by all means the day is not over. So at 5 o'clock, after the break, we have a keynote speech from IBM, from Meredith Stowell, and she's going to be giving us a session on cloud and IBM Z, or IBM Z for our American friends. So that will run from 5 until 6 o'clock UK time. And then tomorrow, it's our last day of the conference, but we have a full agenda for the security stream starting at 9 AM sharp. So I'm really sorry, Patricia, if you're still tuned in, it's going to be a really early start for you tomorrow morning. But we've got basically sessions on the security stream and other streams throughout the day, running right until 5 o'clock. So hopefully you can join us for that. But Hans, it's great to see you again. You're looking very well, and I can recognise some, like I say, you're in the office there in Delft. So I'm sure we'll be in touch at some point in the future. And thank you very much once again.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
And I'll try to wake up in time.
Oh, good. Thanks, Patricia. See you later. Take care.